What if the greatest secret of humanity has been hidden for centuries? What if the very foundation of our suffering, self-consciousness, and the struggles we face every day can be traced back to one fateful event, the fall of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden? The story we've heard time and time again is more than just a myth. It's a tale of knowledge, vulnerability, and the inevitable consequences of our awareness of good and evil. But what if this knowledge is the reason we face so much pain today? What if we've been missing the true meaning of this story for thousands of years? Why do we work so tirelessly, constantly seeking to secure our futures? Why do we feel exposed, vulnerable, and self-conscious in front of others? What is the true nature of suffering, and why do we experience it in the way that we do? Could the answer lie in the profound truth of the fall? Could understanding this ancient narrative finally unlock the key to why we are the way we are? In this video, we will uncover the hidden truths behind the fall of Adam and Eve, the birth of self-consciousness, and the knowledge of good and evil. You will discover how these revelations not only shaped humanity's journey, but also revealed the divine consequences that we continue to live with today. The curse that followed, our vulnerability, our need for work, and the very essence of human suffering may be far more meaningful than we ever realized. We will also explore the heartbreaking consequences that followed. The first murder of Cain and Abel, jealousy, and the cycle of violence that continues through humanity. But more importantly, we'll dive into the hope for redemption that lies at the heart of it all. Because the fall of man was never the end of the story. It was the beginning of our quest for salvation. Are you ready to explore the real story behind the fall and discover how its lessons can change your life today? Make sure to like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more insights as we uncover the profound truths that have been kept hidden for far too long. The beginning, a paradisal existence. In the beginning, Adam and Eve stood in the purity of paradise, untouched by the burdens of time, self-consciousness, or mortality. Their world was one of innocence, where the knowledge of death was absent, and their existence was marked by harmony. Imagine a place where there are no fears, no vulnerabilities, no desires. It was a state of grace, a perfect union between humanity and the Creator. They were one with the land, the animals, and the divine. Everything was as it should be. But there was something more, a deeper aspect of existence that they could not yet understand. They were untouched by the harsh realities of life. This was the state of man before the fall, a state of purity. However, even in this state, something stirring existed within the human heart. A curiosity, a desire for understanding, a thirst for more. Isn't it true that as human beings, we are never fully content with simplicity? We always seek to understand the depths, to ask questions, to reach beyond the boundaries of what we know. This curiosity, this yearning for wisdom, would ultimately be the catalyst for the change that was to come. But in the garden, Adam and Eve knew only peace. They had no need for clothing because they knew not of vulnerability or shame. Their hearts were free from fear, and they lived in perfect trust in the Creator. This pure existence speaks to something deep within us, a longing for peace, for a world untainted by the complexities of life. Yet this simplicity was not to last. Paradise, though beautiful, was incomplete without the knowledge that would come to define human existence. And so, a choice would be made, a choice that would alter the course of history. The question arises, what would you do in a world where you knew no suffering, no shame, no fear? Could you stay content with such purity, or would you too, like Adam and Eve, seek more? This is the essence of humanity, a constant longing for understanding, for more, for depth. We can learn from their innocence, yet also from the inevitable restlessness that is woven into the fabric of our being. The awakening, knowledge of good and evil. The moment Eve took the apple and ate, the world shifted forever. The scales fell from her eyes, and in that moment her innocence was lost, and with it, the unawareness of mortality. She shared the fruit with Adam, and together they crossed into a new realm of existence. They became aware of their nakedness, an awareness that signaled the arrival of something far greater than physical exposure, the recognition of vulnerability. They realized at that moment they were fragile, imperfect, and mortal. For the first time, they understood their limitations. This awareness, the sudden realization of good and evil, was more than just an awakening. It was the introduction of suffering itself. In that instant, Adam and Eve became aware of their fragility, their mortality. The knowledge of good and evil is not simply intellectual, it's personal. It touches the deepest part of the soul. Imagine how terrifying it must have been to suddenly know that everything around you is temporary, that you too will face death, that you too could cause harm. The awareness of self is a heavy burden, but it is also the birth of human consciousness. In today's world, we experience something similar. Moments of sudden realization when we face our vulnerabilities. Whether it's the loss of a loved one, a personal failure, or even the sudden awareness of our own aging, we are confronted with the knowledge of good and evil in every aspect of our lives. It's painful, but it's necessary. For how can we truly live without knowing the weight of our choices? The knowledge of good and evil offers us not just wisdom, but the ability to create, to harm, and to heal. But why do we as humans seek this knowledge? What is it within us that drives us to want to know both the good and the bad, to experience both joy and pain? It is in this paradox that we find the true nature of humanity. We are beings who are made to wrestle with our imperfections, to confront our vulnerability, and to seek redemption. The fall of Adam and Eve wasn't just a story of sin. It was the beginning of a journey that all of humanity would share, the journey of understanding, of growth, of redemption. The consequences. The curse of self-consciousness. With knowledge came awareness, and with awareness came shame. When Adam and Eve realized they were naked, they immediately felt exposed, vulnerable, and ashamed. Their once innocent existence had been shattered, replaced by the weight of self-consciousness. The curse of self-consciousness is not merely about being aware of our flaws. It is the burden of knowing that we can be judged, that others can see our weaknesses and vulnerabilities. It is the weight of self-doubt, the fear of not being enough, the anxiety that comes with knowing we are mortal. Self-consciousness is the root of so much of our suffering. We all experience it in different ways. Whether it's the awkwardness we feel in social situations, the fear we feel when we stand before others, or the doubt we carry about our worth, self-consciousness can make us feel small and fragile. But this is not the end of the story. Self-consciousness is a powerful force, and though it brings suffering, it also offers us the opportunity for growth. In moments of self-doubt, we are reminded of our humanity. In those times when we feel exposed, vulnerable, or imperfect, we are actually being called to evolve. It is through this awareness that we have the chance to change, to heal. Because to be self-conscious is to be aware that we are capable of growth, of transformation. It is through our flaws that we learn to become better versions of ourselves. And so we must ask, what does it mean to embrace our vulnerability? How can we use our awareness of imperfection as a tool for healing and growth, rather than a source of shame? The curse of self-consciousness is not the end. It is an invitation to embrace our humanity and become more than we ever thought possible. It's through this awareness that we can truly change the world, starting with ourselves. As we journey deeper into the story, we begin to see that the fall was not just about the loss of paradise. It was the beginning of a new chapter in human history, one that would shape every individual and every culture in ways we are still discovering today. The work of suffering, the need for labor. In the wake of their newfound awareness, Adam and Eve were cast from the Garden of Eden, and with their exile came the curse of labor. The simple, harmonious life they once knew was replaced by toil, struggle, and the constant fight for survival. God told Adam, "By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground." This wasn't just a punishment, it was a divine revelation. To live in the world now meant that work would be part of the human condition. It wasn't simply about making a living, it was about navigating the weight of mortality. Work became the vehicle for confronting the reality of human vulnerability. Before the fall, Adam and Eve had no need for labor because they were provided for. But now, in the knowledge of good and evil, they face the fundamental challenge of life: survival. This work is not just physical, it's existential. As we labor, we engage with the world, confronting the harshness of life, the impermanence of everything around us. Every act of work becomes a sacrifice, a decision to invest in the future while surrendering the present moment. In our own lives, work holds a similar meaning. The days may be long and the struggles real, but they carry a deeper significance than mere survival. Work allows us to build a legacy, to create meaning from chaos, to make sense of a world filled with vulnerability and impermanence. When we wake up each day and engage in our tasks, whether it's providing for our families or pursuing our passions, we are continuing the work that began with Adam and Eve. We are faced with the choice to rise above suffering and create something valuable from it. But why does work often feel burdensome, even with its rewards? The answer lies in the tension between the human desire for ease and the reality of a world built on effort. Adam's curse was not just a curse for him, but a universal truth for all of humanity. We work because we must confront the limitations of our existence, because without that labor, we are left to face the gnawing question: how do we survive in a world that is fleeting, uncertain, and full of suffering? Yet, there is beauty in work, even in its hardest moments. Just as the seed must be buried in the earth before it can sprout, our labor becomes a form of sacrifice, a means of growth. And in that growth, we find our purpose. In our struggles, we discover the strength that was always within us. Through work, we transcend the fear of mortality and create something that outlasts us. The lesson is clear. Even in suffering, there is opportunity for redemption. And with each task we take on, we are weaving a tapestry of meaning, a story that connects us to the divine purpose that began in Eden. Eve's curse, the pain of childbirth and dependency. As Adam received his curse, Eve too was given a heavy burden. Her punishment was one that would echo through the generations, the pain of childbirth and the dependency that would follow. "I will greatly increase your pains in childbearing. With pain you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." This was no small curse. It speaks to the nature of womanhood and motherhood, two roles that carry immense responsibility, but also profound beauty. The pain of childbirth is not just a physical experience, it is symbolic of the sacrifices that come with life itself. To bring life into the world requires not just physical effort, but emotional, spiritual, and psychological endurance. Every mother knows the pain of childbirth, but every mother also knows the joy of new life. In the act of giving birth, Eve's curse became a source of renewal, a reminder that even in suffering, life continues, and in every moment of pain, there is the potential for something beautiful to emerge. Eve's curse also speaks to the profound relationship between dependence and independence. The dependency that was now placed upon Eve, and by extension on all women, mirrors the tension between vulnerability and strength. To be dependent is to be human. We all depend on others in various ways, whether it is our families, friends, or communities. Yet, Eve's experience also highlights the power of connection. The relationships we form are the vessels through which we experience both pain and joy. Eve's curse was a call to recognize the importance of these relationships, for they are the true sustenance of life. In modern times, we see this curse play out not just in the pain of childbirth, but in the everyday experiences of dependency and connection. Women continue to bear the weight of childbearing, but this is not solely a physical burden. It is a reminder of the deeper truths about life, our connections to each other, our roles in the cycle of life, and the sacrifices we make for love. The lesson here is one of balance, that in our vulnerability, in our dependence, there is strength. It is through these connections that we are able to heal, to grow, and to find our purpose. The first murder, Cain and Abel. The first story of human conflict is one of the most devastating, Cain and Abel. The two brothers, each offering sacrifices to God, were met with different responses. Abel's sacrifice was accepted, while Cain's was not. This rejection stirred something deep within Cain, resentment, anger, and jealousy. And in that moment, Cain made the decision to kill his brother. The first murder was not just an act of violence, it was the manifestation of unchecked emotions, resentment, insecurity, and jealousy. When Cain faced rejection, rather than confronting his feelings or seeking to understand the deeper reasons behind his sacrifice's failure, he allowed his emotions to fester. The result was catastrophic. Cain's response to his suffering was not to seek redemption or reconciliation, but to destroy what he could not possess. Cain's story is one we all know too well. We've all felt rejected, judged, or overlooked at some point in our lives. It's in those moments that our true character is tested. Do we lash out in anger, or do we take a step back and seek understanding? Do we let resentment build until it poisons our relationships, or do we find healing in our pain? The murder of Abel was a tragic moment in human history, but it holds a powerful lesson. It shows us what happens when we allow our wounds to turn into weapons. It reminds us that resentment, when left unchecked, can destroy not only our relationships but also our very souls. Cain's curse, which followed his crime, was a direct consequence of his inability to confront his emotions in a healthy way. His descendants would carry the weight of his sin, and violence would spread like a poison through his lineage. The lesson here is one of self-awareness and emotional control. Just as Cain's violence was a response to his suffering, our own reactions to hardship can either heal or harm us. When we feel rejected, we must ask ourselves, are we seeking healing, or are we allowing anger to cloud our judgment? The choice to confront our emotions with grace and wisdom will shape not only our lives, but also the lives of those around us. Just as Cain had the chance to repent and change his ways, so too do we. And with that understanding, we move forward in our journey, a journey shaped by the knowledge of good and evil, of vulnerability and strength, of sacrifice and redemption. The cycle of violence, the legacy of Cain. The story of Cain and Abel was not an isolated incident, but the beginning of a cycle of violence that would permeate human history. After Cain murdered Abel, God marked him to protect him from being killed, but the mark also carried a curse. Cain would wander the earth, carrying the weight of his sin, and his descendants would follow in his footsteps. The violence Cain initiated did not end with him. It multiplied, growing with each generation, like an unchecked fire consuming everything in its path. This legacy of violence is something we see repeated throughout human history. Cain's descendants, though they flourished in some ways, were marked by a growing propensity for violence. The descendants of Cain escalated their brutality. If someone wronged them, they didn't seek justice. They sought vengeance, and not just for themselves, but for their entire lineage. Lamech, a descendant of Cain, even boasted about killing a man in retaliation for being hurt, declaring that if Cain was avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. This was a breaking of the natural order, where each act of harm created an exponential response. the cycle of violence spiraled out of control. This story is a profound warning for us today. Every act of violence, every unresolved wound contributes to a greater cycle that spans generations. When we allow anger, resentment, and bitterness to fester, we pass those emotions down, infecting our relationships, our families, and even society. This is the destructive power of unchecked rage. It shows us that violence is not just a physical act, it's a spiritual contagion. The cycle of violence is perpetuated by the human heart's inability to forgive and seek reconciliation. When we look at the world today, the echoes of Cain's actions are still with us. Wars, conflicts, and acts of violence are often driven by the same unhealed wounds that began with Cain. How many times do we see individuals, families, or nations caught in a cycle of retribution, never breaking free from the pain of the past? The question we must ask ourselves is, how do we break this cycle? The answer lies in forgiveness, healing, and the willingness to confront our own anger and resentment before they escalate into violence. Breaking the cycle of violence begins with the choice to heal rather than hurt. It requires us to confront the wounds of our past, to forgive those who have wronged us, and to take responsibility for the ways in which our own actions contribute to harm. Only then can we begin to rewrite the narrative of our lives, choosing peace over conflict, reconciliation over retaliation. It's a hard journey, but it's one worth taking, because only by breaking the cycle can we create a future that is free from the chains of the past. The flood, the wrath of God, and the redemption of humanity. The flood was one of the most devastating events in biblical history, a moment when God's wrath was poured out upon the earth in response to the corruption and violence that had taken root in humanity. But the flood was not just an act of judgment, it was also a moment of redemption. Noah, a righteous man in a corrupt world, was chosen by God to build an ark and save his family and the animals from the coming destruction. The floodwaters cleansed the earth, wiping away the sin and violence that had plagued humanity. The flood, while a symbol of God's judgment, also speaks to the hope of renewal. It shows that no matter how deep the corruption or how widespread the sin, God provides a way for redemption. The ark was not just a means of survival, it was a symbol of God's mercy, a vessel through which the possibility of new life could emerge. The floodwaters, in all their fury, served to cleanse the earth and prepare it for a new beginning. For us, the flood represents the trials and struggles we face in our own lives. Just as Noah endured the flood and emerged on the other side, so too do we face our own challenges. Moments of trial that seem insurmountable, overwhelming, even devastating. But these moments are not the end of our story. Like the floodwaters, our trials have the potential to cleanse and purify us. They are the storms that shape us, refine us, and prepare us for a new chapter. The lesson of the flood is clear. Even in the darkest moments, there is hope. Even in the face of destruction, there is a way to rebuild. The ark that Noah built represents the faith and perseverance that carry us through the storm. When we are faced with hardship, we can choose to build our own ark, an ark of faith, resilience, and trust in the promise of renewal. The flood teaches us that after every storm, there is a new beginning, and through every trial, there is an opportunity to emerge stronger, wiser, and more faithful. But the story of the flood also calls us to reflect on our own actions. Are we contributing to the corruption and violence of the world? Or are we striving to live in righteousness like Noah? Are we building arks of hope and redemption in our own lives? Or are we letting the floodwaters of sin and suffering overtake us? The flood reminds us that the choices we make today have the power to shape the world for future generations. Let us choose to build, to create, to heal, and to redeem. The fall, the curse, and the hope for redemption. The story of Adam and Eve is not just a tale of fall and punishment. It is also a story of hope, of redemption. When God cast Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden, they faced the consequences of their disobedience. But God did not leave them without a promise. Even in the midst of their exile, God promised that one day a Redeemer would come, a seed who would crush the head of the serpent and restore humanity's relationship with God. This promise of redemption was the light in the darkness, the hope amidst the curse. The curse that Adam and Eve received was not just a punishment. It was a part of the larger story of salvation. Through their fall, humanity became aware of its need for a savior. Without the fall, there would be no need for redemption. The curse of suffering, work, and death led to the longing for salvation, a longing that would be fulfilled in the coming of Christ. In this way, the fall, though tragic, was also a necessary part of God's plan for the world. For us today, the story of the fall reminds us of our own vulnerability and need for redemption. We too have fallen short in many ways. We too face the consequences of our actions, and we too carry the weight of the curse. But the story does not end there. Just as Adam and Eve were given the promise of redemption, so too are we. Through Christ, we are offered the hope of restoration, the chance to be made whole again. This is the essence of the gospel, that no matter how far we fall, no matter how deep the curse, redemption is always within reach. It is through Christ that we are offered the chance to be healed, to be restored, to be made new. The fall of humanity was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning of the greatest story ever told, the story of salvation. And in that story, we find our place, we find our hope, we find our redemption. The lesson is clear. No matter how deep our fall, no matter how far we have strayed, there is always the hope of redemption. The curse of sin is not the end. It is the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where we are invited to experience the grace, mercy, and love of a God who is always ready to redeem us. And so, we continue the journey, knowing that the fall is not the final word. Redemption is. In the midst of life's chaos, the story of Adam and Eve, their fall from grace, and the path to redemption offers us profound wisdom, one that resonates with us on a deeply personal level. The journey from innocence to knowledge, from purity to vulnerability, is a reflection of our own struggles. We too carry the burden of self-awareness, the weight of our choices, and the inevitable consequences of our actions. And yet, amid the turmoil, there is always the whisper of hope. Just as Adam and Eve were given a promise of redemption, we too are offered the same, an invitation to rise above the curse and walk in the light of grace. In every hardship we face, in every moment of pain or despair, there is the potential for growth. The story of Adam and Eve is not just about the loss of paradise, it's about the rebirth of the human spirit. It's about understanding that suffering is not the end, but the beginning of transformation. Just as they were given the chance to rebuild, to create, to find redemption, so too do we have the opportunity to turn our struggles into triumphs, our weaknesses into strength. When we face rejection, failure, or pain, we are not abandoned. We are invited to walk through the fire and emerge stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. The curse is not a permanent sentence, but a temporary challenge. A challenge that, when faced with faith, can be turned into a blessing. The key lies in our response. Do we allow the trials to break us, or do we rise above them, knowing that there is something greater waiting on the other side? Do we surrender to the bitterness of resentment, or do we choose forgiveness and healing? The lessons embedded in this story speak directly to the struggles of the human heart. We are all part of this grand narrative, experiencing the same cycles of pain and joy, doubt and faith, suffering and redemption. And yet, the hope remains unwavering. No matter how deep our fall, no matter how far we stray, redemption is always within our reach. It is not about perfection, it is about progress. It is not about avoiding suffering, it is about embracing the lessons it brings. As we navigate our own journeys, we must remember that the path to redemption is paved with faith, resilience, and love. The power of the story lies in its universality. The fall of Adam and Eve is not just a tale from ancient times, it is a mirror reflecting our own lives. We are all part of this eternal story, and in our hearts, we know that the hope for restoration is always alive. If this video has touched your soul, if it has helped you find light in the darkest of times, I invite you to share that energy with me. Your support, whether in the form of a like, a comment, or a simple word of encouragement, means the world to me. Each small gesture fuels my desire to continue sharing these powerful lessons with you. Together, we can walk this path of redemption, healing, and grace. Your presence here, your willingness to engage, is a gift to me, a gift that I carry with me as I continue to create more content that inspires, heals, and uplifts. So, if you feel that this message resonates with you, if it speaks to a place within your heart that longs for healing and peace, I invite you to support this channel. Your encouragement helps keep this journey alive, and I'm incredibly grateful for every bit of energy you send my way. Thank you, from the very core of my being, for being part of this community, for allowing me to walk alongside you in this journey of spiritual growth and transformation. Let us continue to learn, grow, and heal together. And as always, may the light of grace guide you in every step you take.